Hi, I'm Micah Clark. I appreciate you joining us today. With me today, I have a good friend I've known for many years, a former Hoosier who lives in Ohio right now, which is relevant to our video today. But Mike Spencer is a former pastor in Fort Wayne. He's been with Life Training Institute for 8 years, but then he started an organization he founded called Project LifeVoice. And Michael, thank you for joining us. Appreciate seeing you. It's good to see you, my friend.
It's
And
good to see you too, Micah. Thank you.
tell our audience about Project LifeVoice first.
Sure. Well, again, thanks for the opportunity, Micah. So Project LifeVoice is a gospel-driven human rights ministry that equips and inspires pro-life ambassadors to speak compellingly and to act sacrificially on behalf of those that are most marginalized, most oppressed, and most targeted among us. And that, of course, is our preborn neighbors who are targeted by elective abortion. So I do a lot of work in high school settings, a lot of banquet speaking, and then also speaking a lot to pastors' luncheons and breakfasts and things like that. But it's all toward the end of really encouraging people to be a voice for the voiceless.
Well, recently you spoke at my church. You did a phenomenal job. You gave one of the best pro-life sermons I've ever heard. Explain what abortion is, what the Bible says, and actually dispelling a lot of the falsehoods that people hear in the media from the pro-abortion side. The arguments used there, it was outstanding. And I thought, is there any argument you're hearing now post Roe? Have those arguments changed at all, or are they the same arguments we've dealt with for 50 years? You know, my body, my choice.
Right.
What's the top argument maybe you run into?
I think for the most part, they have stayed the same, but there's been more of an emphasis on something, like particularly that abortion is healthcare, that women need abortion to save their lives. And of course, that's not true. Abortion is the intentional killing of an unborn child, and doctors never need to intentionally kill an unborn child to save a mother's life. There are many life-threatening pregnancy-related conditions such as chorioamnionitis, severe placental abruption, ectopic pregnancy that do threaten women's lives. But in each of those cases, doctors can either deliver the baby early or through induction of labor or C-section, and perhaps so early that the baby would die. But that's not an abortion because the intent is to save the mother's life and not to intentionally kill the baby. So that would probably be the one that I think has gotten a lot of airplay here in the last several months, at least since Dobbs, and the fall of Roe.
Well, 2 summers ago in 2022, Indiana passed an extensive abortion ban. We had a special legislative session. The battle a lot was over exceptions. I knew, politics is the art of what's possible sometimes. I knew our law would have exceptions for rape and incest, and that's a political matter. I don't like exceptions. But something I learned from you many years ago, when you're crafting legislation, maybe constitutionally or maybe for getting 51 votes, out of a 100-member body, you have to have an exception. But what I learned from you years ago is when people argue exceptions, they're usually arguing an exception to justify all abortions. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah. So, well, I'm frequently in high school settings. In fact, I was this past week at 2 different high schools in Cincinnati. And I can promise you almost every time the first question that I'm going to get after usually I'm doing an assembly and then I have a kind of a Q&A time at the end. And the first question I get almost every time is what about rape? What if a young woman or a young girl is raped and conceives a child against her will? And the problem with this kind of thinking, of course, that has bled into so much of the church, because we have a lot of professing Christians who would call themselves pro-life, who still think that we need abortion to either save women's lives, or in this case, in the case of rape where a child has been conceived, so that the woman, presumably so that the woman doesn't have to suffer through a greater trauma of having to give birth to a baby that she didn't choose to have. Now, to be very clear, to be very clear about this, we have compassion in the pro-life community for both the mother and the baby that has been conceived. So the question in the case of rape is not how was one conceived, but rather was one conceived? And regardless of where people stand on the issue of capital punishment, I don't know of anybody who thinks that we should be giving the death penalty to an innocent child for the crimes of the guilty father, the rapist in this case. So I would just, there's a longer answer that I could give, but in short, the tragic violence of rape never justifies the tragic violence of abortion. How somebody was conceived is not relevant. It doesn't change or alter their nature or their value in any way. And so that's why I oppose even a rape exception. Again, we deal with political realities, and I understand that. But ultimately, the goal, of course, is we want to see abortion completely abolished. Yeah.
I agree with you completely. I'm not for exceptions, but passing the law is a little different. There's things you have to do that are possible. But just for those who may not know, you probably know the Guttmacher statistics, and Alan Guttmacher was associated with Planned Parenthood, America's leading abortion provider, for decades. Maybe they still are. But their numbers on rape and incest are probably a lot lower than people think. It's less than 1% of all abortions. So two things I want to ask you. What is that number, if you know that number? And two, how many abortions are performed in America each year? Because that really sets the question of exceptions, I think. We're arguing about the minutia and missing the thousands and millions of lives that could be saved.
Well, two things there. First of all, my understanding is that what the Guttmacher Institute is reporting is accurate. That's less than 1% of all abortions are because of rape. But I do think I would caution your viewers on this, because I think we make a big tactical mistake as pro-lifers when we make that, when we lead with that. In other words, if I'm, like, for instance, when I'm on a high school campus or a college campus or whatever, and somebody asks me the question about rape, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to acknowledge the emotional difficulty of that challenge. Because let's be honest, women and young girls do get raped, and many times they do become pregnant. And I'm married to a woman. I have 4 daughters and I have 4 granddaughters. And I can't imagine one of my loved ones, first of all, being raped, only to find out weeks later that now she's pregnant with a child she didn't choose to conceive. So I think we just want to be careful that that's the first part, by the way, of my response, but we want to be careful that we don't say, well, that's less than 1% of all abortions, which I know is not what you're doing. But the second thing then that we really want to do is we want to ask the question, but how should a civilized society treat those who remind us of a painful event? Should we kill them? And I don't think that we should. So the 1% statistic, I think, is accurate by all accounts, but the question really is not what is the number of babies that are being aborted because of rape, but more to the point, does rape alter or change the value or the nature of an unborn child? And it clearly doesn't. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, exactly. The excuses that are used by the other side to justify abortion are many, of course, and there is no consensus among them about what makes somebody a valuable person and what doesn't. But things like rape, life of the mother, all of these arguments that we're hearing from the other side are ignoring the simple fact that the unborn child, regardless of how that child was conceived, is a distinct, living, and whole human being according to the science of human embryology, and that's from day one as a single cell zygote. And our argument as pro-lifers is that we shouldn't discriminate against people because they're small or because of where they're located or because of some fetal anomaly, that every human life is precious and should be cherished and protected from day one throughout their natural life.
Well, the reason I wanted you to join us today particularly was for the viewers in our audience who may have family in Ohio or friends in Ohio. There's an enormously important battle going on in Ohio.
Mm-hmm.
It's important for Hoosiers too, because we passed this law protecting life in Indiana. Again, not a perfect law, but an important law. Ohio could become a new destination point for abortion because of a referendum on your ballot. Tell us about that referendum, who's behind it, maybe what it says, or what your concerns are, and what people, let's just start there. Tell us about that for now.
Okay, well, since Dobbs and the ensuing fall of Roe v. Wade a year ago last June, the abortion lobby has adopted a new tactic, and that is state constitutional amendments. And so what they're trying to do here in Ohio with issue one. It's called issue one, and this will be on the November 7th ballot. So we're less than 3 weeks away from voting on this. What they have done is they have circumvented, if you will, our state legislature, which is relatively conservative, our governor who's relatively conservative, as well as our Supreme Court. And what they've done is they are pouring millions, literally millions of dollars. I've heard reports that as high as $70 million is being poured into our state by outside influences. We only, by the way, for this, well, let me say what it will do. If issue one passes, this is going to do 3 things. First of all, it is going to legalize abortion in our state right until the moment of birth. This is not hyperbole. This is not exaggeration. That is what it's going to do. We are going to be in the category of the states like California and New York if this passes on November 7th. The second thing that it's going to do is it's going to free the abortion industry from having to comply with basic safety and health regulations that were put in place by Ohio voters to protect women. So they will no longer be obligated to comply with those. And then thirdly, and perhaps most insidiously, is that they are going to strip parental rights. So minors who want to have an abortion, or even minors who are being pressured into sex change surgeries, will not have to have parental consent anymore. Now, the other side is arguing in their ads that this is not the case. But the groups that are pushing for this are Protect Choice Ohio and Ohioans for Reproductive Freedom, as well as URGE, which I forget what that stands for, Unite for Reproductive and Gender Equity. These groups have a long track record of opposing parental rights. In fact, let me read a quote for you here. This is from URGE, okay? And this was a 2020 tweet that they put out. It said, quote, "Your daily reminder that parental involvement laws are unethical and must be abolished. Every pregnant person deserves full autonomy over their body and pregnancy, regardless of their age or their family situation." So we know the track record is clear here in Ohio and throughout the United States. We know what these groups like the ACLU, Planned Parenthood, and these two local groups here are about. They want to strip parents of their ability to make these decisions and to help make these decisions for their children. So this is what we're facing. This is the moral equivalent of a Category 5 hurricane here in Ohio. This is something we have never seen before. So and the state has become quite animated over this. In fact, in my little town of 12,000 people, you can hardly drive through a neighborhood and not see signs either for or against issue one. I mean, the battle lines have really been drawn clearly. And I would add this: what's happening here is a little bit unique in Ohio. Not completely. We've seen this in other states like Vermont, California, and Michigan that all passed constitutional amendments codifying abortion into law. But we've seen in other states that are conservatively, or I should say traditionally conservative or red states like Kentucky, where they have attempted to pass state constitutional amendments of their own to protect the preborn in all 3 of those fields. So we have 6 states in the last year that have failed to provide lasting protection for the unborn. So this is very serious. All eyes are on Ohio right now. And if they win, the other side wins, if we do not defeat issue one, this is going to be blood in the water for them. They're going to see that this is the way that they're going to get laws passed, is by going to, or getting constitutions passed, is by going to with these state amendments. We're going to see it everywhere, not just in Ohio. So we need pastors in Indiana, where you're at, and in every state, to be preaching against this and teaching against this, to blow Ezekiel's trumpet.
Yep. Well, you talk about how radical this amendment is, this referendum is. What I hear you saying is, if this amendment one or issue one passes, you will then have tattoo parlors and veterinarian clinics that have more regulations and better safety than an abortion clinic.
Yes, it's insane. This is absolute moral insanity, but you are exactly right.
So the vote that we want people, because I can say this, I don't live, we're a 501c3, but this doesn't apply to referendums and it doesn't apply to other states. We want people in Ohio to vote no on issue one.
That's right. Vote no on issue one. And this has been a little bit confusing because we had an issue one back on August 8th, which was to raise the threshold to amend a state constitution from 50% plus one to 60%. That amendment failed, unfortunately. But there's confusion because that was called issue one and this one's called issue one. But to be very,
Okay.
very clear, we are pleading with not just Christians, not just pro-lifers, but anybody who thinks that parental rights should be protected, right? That women should be protected, okay? We are pleading with them to vote no on issue one on November 7th, yeah.
I just saw a study recently. I'm not sure exactly where I read it, but it doesn't surprise me, and I believe it was true, that Planned Parenthood is the nation's largest abortion provider. But what people don't realize probably is they are now the second leading provider of puberty blocking drugs. They're moving into the gender transition, which
That's right.
medical scene, which is extremely expensive. You have a sex change operation, you're a lifelong patient, basically.
Right.
You have to take these drugs
Right.
forever, or your body will revert to what it really is. And so this goes way beyond just abortion. This is a radical
That's right.
proposal.
That's right. This is extreme, very extreme. Of course, it's being packaged by the other side as, women need abortion, abortion is health care. Women need abortion to save their lives, this kind of thing. They're denying that this is going to be an attack on parental rights. But the language is very clear, and it's very obvious what they are doing here. When I say it's clear, it's actually vague, but it's clear what they're doing with the vague language, that's what they're after.
I noticed that I think last week your governor came out and warned against this, urged people to vote against this because it undermines your democracy, really, your elected officials, and it undermines the state ability to protect women in abortion clinics as well as babies.
Yeah, that's right.
So what other, obviously we need to pray. Everyone watching who's here can pray, but what else can our Indiana audience do? Obviously contact people and family they know in Ohio and urge them to vote. But what other help is there anything else we can do to help here in Indiana?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, if they know family, they have family or friends in the state of Ohio, they should be on the phone to them, pleading with them and educating them to vote against issue one. The other thing that we are encouraging people to do is to sign up to do door knocking and phone calling. Now, the people in Indiana are not going to be knocking on doors in Ohio. I realize that the distance is going to prevent that, but they can do phone calling, and they can contact Created Equal through their website, createdequal.org. That's in Columbus. They can also contact Protect Women Ohio here in Ohio. And these two organizations are organizing door knocking campaigns and phone calling campaigns. And they give quick training on how to do this. I shouldn't say quick training, they give really good training on how to do this. So if any of your listeners or viewers are interested in that, they can do that. The other thing is, money. Even at this late hour, we're encouraging people to give financially to Protect Women Ohio, who have kind of led the way with some of these pro-life ads and some of these anti-issue one ads, so they can also do that through their website. And then, of course, we need the body of Christ praying. God promises to bring revival to a land and to honor a nation that honors him. And so we're really encouraging Christians throughout, not just in Ohio, but beyond, to be praying about this in Ohio.
Well, Michael, we will put those in our email. We'll put the Protecting Women websites and those things in this email when we send out for this video.
Great.
But I encourage people to pray, contact people you know in Ohio, contact family, urge them to vote no on issue one on November 7th. I'm assuming at this date, early voting's already begun.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
Okay. So they can vote early and vote now and contact your family now. Don't wait for November to contact them. Contact them as soon as possible before they go vote.
Yeah, and if I can add one more thought to this, we're really encouraging, and I know that the battlefront right now is, the battleground is here in Ohio, and your audience is primarily Indiana, I realize, but even those in Indiana, we're pleading with those who are sitting in churches where the shepherds are silent to respectfully, prayerfully, but to go to those shepherds and to be asking them to be praying about this from the pulpits on Sunday morning, and not just about the issue one in Ohio, but about the abortion issue in general here in the United States. We really need the body of Christ to wake up. And frankly, if the body of Christ wakes up on this issue, we're not going to see these kinds of amendments passing in our states. So,
well, Michael, thank you for all you do. I appreciate your friendship over the years. God bless you for what you're doing. You're a true warrior, and I've said that to you before, but you're a patriot and warrior for life, and I just appreciate all you're doing. So Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, I thank you for viewing. Again, if you have family in Ohio, please contact them or friends. If you live along the border, I actually heard about a college where I have a family member attending, a Christian college where several students went to Ohio and knocked on doors. That's something you can do, homeschool groups. Ohio is, even from Indianapolis, is only an hour and a half away, 2 hours away. You can get there and make a difference and do door to door with a group's assistance for just a few hours and make a difference. Every vote's going to count in this initiative on issue 1. Urge people to vote no to protect life, protect parental rights in Ohio. So again, I'm Micah Clark. Thank you for joining us. Appreciate you watching these videos, and I hope you have a great weekend.